Okay, welcome back, word students. This is the second in our series of lectures on chapter five. I'm going to apologize now because I said this when I was doing my lectures on chapter four. Between you and me, I was very distracted. My cats were, it was a whole deal. So I kept saying chapter five when I meant to say chapter four. And I think I'm going to try to go back and fix it. So maybe you'll never see it. But for now, this is really chapter five. And it's the second lecture, and it's going to be really good. So, we are just continuing talking about this long list of stems in this chapter and the words related to them. So, the next on our list is era. That's how it's pronounced, is era. If you come study Latin, you will meet this word. It's a great word. It is not related to the word ira. That's got to be a totally different name. There's not many iras. Oh, well, there's Ira Glass. No, there's plenty of iras around there. But anyhow, this word, this Latin word, is pronounced ira. It means anger. The stem is IR. Now, this is a tricky one because we also know some prefixes that are like IR. Think of the word irregular, which is just IN turned into an R. So those are different. And you're just going to have to encounter both of them and see. But there aren't actually that many words related to era. We have ire, which comes straight from era. So ire just means anger. And when you're irate, you're angry. And then irascible is related to that inceptive verb we learned. So technically it means able to become angry, but I think it mainly just means angry. Just it's that simplification of things. Um, so, well, I mean, I guess. Well, you think about maybe we can make a change and make sure that irascible just means able to become angry, not consistently angry all the time. All right, but that's that one. And then this, so to this, you're going to see here ire, IRE, and then etus. Now, believe it or not, this is a very small little verb. I mean, the letters are small, but the meaning is huge. So technically it's pronounced ire, etus to distinguish it from era. Well, it's not that big of a distinguishment. So, and if you were to ever like conjugate this verb in Latin, this is it's just a short little word. So eo is it is I go, you go. He, she, or it goes. And so as a result, and then etus is the perfect passive. So you might think, oh, there is not, it's difficult to make the word to go passive, but the Romans did it all the time. They were very fond of doing it. So as a result, we have a lot of interesting words coming from this, but they're a little bit hard to find sometimes because the stem is either just an I or an IT. So if you look at the word ambient, what's happening here is the stem ambi, which I do believe we've learned. No, maybe we learn it in this chapter. Ambi means around. But then we have ient, which is the present active participle of ire. So ambient, I-E-N-T ending here means going, and then amb means around, going around. And so ambient also is, of course, related to ambience, which is like a feeling of being around. Ambiance is related to this word. It's just that's the French version. And so ambiance is like the vibe, essentially, the thing that's around. Ambition is kind of related. I mean, it's definitely related to this verb, but in a different way. So the book explains this in greater detail, but in ancient Rome, there was this thing called an ambitio. So look at this word, take off the N, that's the Roman word, ambitio. And what that means was it was like a road around, a going around. It's more closely related to the perfect passive participle. And ambitio was the process in which a political candidate or someone who wanted to be in politics would kind of canvass, right? Would go around door to door trying to gain votes. So that was called ambitio and became associated with ambition because if you were doing that, if you were doing the ambitio, you had ambitions to be a successful politician. And so we've obviously just kept ambition. We've kept the feeling rather than than the process. Because canvas is obviously a radically different word. So anyhow, so that's that. Sedition is that same it from this, it, with s, and then as they threw in a D to account for hiatus here. So the book's talked about hiatus a couple times. I've completely ignored it because I don't think it's that useful to know about, but if you want to talk about it, we can. So anyhow, sedition is basically itio with a D thrown in. And sedition is a going apart from the main group. And then so if you are engaging in sedition, you're seditious. Transit is trans, which is a prefix I know we've talked about with it, this it. So transit is a going across. A transitive verb is related to this, but transitive and intransitive verbs are just much more metaphorical in sense. So a transitive verb can take an object. So the action kind of goes across the verb to an object, whereas an intransitive verb cannot take an object, so the action doesn't transfer over. So a transitive verb is give, right? Like I gave flowers. So the action of giving transfers over to the flowers, but an intransitive verb is kind of like I dance. Really, I dance. The action doesn't go further than that. You can say I dance a dance, right? Like I dance the Macarena. I guess that's possible. So that's not the best version. But oh, and maybe a better version for intransitive is I am born or she is born. That action stops with the verb, it doesn't cross over. So that's transitive versus intransitive. Okay, so linquere me is a Latin verb meaning to leave behind, and then lictus is the perfect passive participle. The reason we have a dash here in the beginning is because though we know there was originally a single verb like this, in every Latin instance we see this verb, it has a prefix in front of it, and most often that prefix is re, relinquere, to leave behind. But nevertheless, we this word comes into English by itself without that stem, and so it leads to without sorry that prefix. So it leads to the stem lingua or licked, and that itself leads to words like derelict. So derelict actually has two prefixes, de and re and licked. And so derelict, we know, we have this kind of idea that derelict is bad, like a derelict house. But I guess when you add those suffixes, it's more just something like left far apart. But, broken is kind of how we think of it now. Relinquish is when you give up, you leave to something else. And then I guess, oh, relic. I was like, sorry, I was looking at this word. I was like, did I leave off? Did I leave off? But so a relic is something left behind by, a saint or some amazing person. So it's the thing that's left behind. So that's how that's related. Okay, so next verb is lucere. Actually comes from like that's a shock, as opposed to all our other verbs. Lucere is a Latin verb, meaning to be clear or to be light. It's related, this is, I think, what I wanted to say. It's related to the Latin word lux, lucus, which we have in our state of California motto, right? Fiat lux, let there be light. Um, and obviously that's a translation of the Bible. But so anyhow, so lucere is the verb of that. And so that leaves us with our stem luke or loose. And so something that's translucent is light can go through, light goes through. Lucid is clear with that id prefix. Pellucid, which is a word, honestly, I don't think I had ever seen before I saw it in the verb, but in the book, but maybe y'all see it out there in the world. But pellucid, you can just deduce it, right? It's pair, that prefix pair, which means through, and then lucid. So pellucid is kind of just like really, really lucid, thoroughly lucid. So that's what's going on here. Munus muneris. Now, this is a great Latin noun. Munus is the nominative form, muneris is the genitive, and so this, but we get two different stems from it, partially because the word munus can also be a noun. And so as a result, we get mun, that's one stem, M-U-N, but often we have muner, and that's coming from the genitive form. Did I just say munus can also be a noun? It is a noun, but the stem is just coming from the two different versions, both the nominative and the genitive. So munus can mean duty, can mean obligation, and it can mean gift. It can have all of these kind of senses. But for the Romans, this would, I mean, I don't think we often would think of your a duty or an obligation as a gift, but it's kind of like something owed and that wasn't necessarily a bad thing for the Romans. Your duty to the state was your gift to the state. So as a result, we get a whole bunch of different interesting words here. Our book it talks about how immune and immunity works. But I mean, for me, the way I always think of it is immunity. If you're immune to something, you have the ability, I'd say, to fight it off. So like a disease grants you immunity by giving you the gift of you can fight off that disease later. That is a terrible explanation, but you can go to the book and see more about what that means. Oh, sorry, I hit the wrong thing. Um, There we go. But I do know munificence. So munificence is that word facio again that we just saw with muni in front of it. So that means to make a gift, but munificence basically is generosity, is how we think of it now. If you're characterized by munificence, you're characterized by your ability to give gifts, and therefore you are generous. Now, commune is when you share duties or obligations together. A commune is a place where you do that. So, of course, communism is related to that, communist, etc. A very controversial word nowadays, and actually for the entire 20th century. But for the Romans, communis, shared, was not really that controversial at the time. And then remuneration, we have this. I do believe you see this more in like a legal context. Remuneration is restoring a gift or restoring a duty. So, like the context in which I'm pretty sure that I've seen it is just, let's say you committed an act of vandalism, you are responsible for remuneration for restoring the loss that you incurred. So giving back, that is your duty. So all of those words are kind of connected in interesting ways. Okay, so this one's a little more straightforward. So nokeo nokara, infinitive form, nokatus is perfect passive participle. This verb means to harm. And I'm not sure. I was like, why did I include a donkey here? I think because innocuous. So the adjective innocuous, knock is that stem, but in is negating. So innocuous would be harmful. And we actually see innocuous a little bit more in noxious, Noxious, which I believe we're talking about at the end of this lecture. But so innocuous is the opposite of that, which means unharmful or not harmful, just like a donkey. At least this donkey, who seems very innocuous. And then innocent, of course, is related to this at all. So innocuous is just a different, really just a different form of innocent. Innocent means not harming. That's its original sense, is not harming. And then a nocibo, this is just in terms to include some medical terminology here. Nocibo is the opposite of a placebo. So placebo is from the Latin word placeo, which means please. So placebo, these are both actually future verbs, but placebo means I will please. So it's a drug that technically does nothing that your doctor gives to you and says, hey, this will make you feel better. And it does. So nocibo is the same idea. It means I will harm. And so they're obviously not used quite as much, but it's the idea that you give someone something that's actually not going to affect them at all, but you tell them that it's going to cause pain or it's going to hurt them and they feel pain like that's what the human mind does. So that's the purpose of a nocibo is to see if the person can do it with their own brain or if this sort of thing, same as the placebo, just different kind of psychology behind it. Yeah, it's really interesting. Okay, so that's nokra. Here's noxious. I knew it was coming. So noxious is related to nokeo, but there is a Latin adjective noxious, and so that's where we get our stem, noxi. And so that's where we get noxious, like noxious fumes. That's why I included this picture, is just because it showed fumes, in my opinion. And then obnoxious is from something harmful or for something harmful. So if someone is obnoxious or if something is obnoxious, it's for harm. It's related to harm originally. I don't think we think so much of obnoxious now as harmful, as just annoying, but used to be. All right, so here's that obsolescere. I had actually thought if I was a better PowerPointer, I was going to put this slide up at the top with adolescence because it's basically the same exact word as mentioned, but with a different prefix. And so obsolescere is inceptive, means to begin to wear out, to go out of style, just like all of these TVs with their very fun little dials here. Um, it's crazy to think that these TVs, when they were originally sold, were probably like adjusted for inflation, like three times the amount of like a huge TV now, different times. Anyhow, so the stem is obsolesque or obsolete, and this is, of course, where we get obsolescent or obsolete. All right, here's a good one. Omnis. Now, omnis is an adjective. It doesn't look like any of the adjectives we've learned because it's technically a third declension adjective, but it's everywhere, right? So I was interested to see our book gave this to us as a stem rather than as a prefix, because that's how I would have thought of it as a prefix, but it's a part of the word. When you see omn, it's going to mean all. I guess sometimes it's its own, like omnibus. So omnivore, someone who eats everything. Omniscient, someone who knows everything. Omnipotent, something that is strong in all ways. Omnificent, someone who does everything. And then omnibus is actually not related to buses. It's not a bus for everybody. Omnibus is a form of this adjective. It's what we would call a dative or an ablative plural form of this adjective. So if you saw omnibus, the word itself, you could see this in Latin. And it would mean for everything, or to, or by, or with everything. And so, what that has come to mean is an omnibus. We see this a lot in relation to bills in government. An omnibus bill is one that covers not like one or two things, but everything. We also have this pops up in a few different places, but when you see the word omnibus, it means for everything. It's meant to be something like comprehensive. So that's what's happening there. All right, so valera valatus, this is our verb. This I thought we had learned this before, but we're just learning it now. I think no, we didn't. So this word means to be strong, to be healthy. If you go on to read Latin, this is one of the harder words to learn because it has to be strong, right? So in English, when we want to say I am strong or you are strong, we use a form of the verb to be with the adjective strong. So strong and healthy, we think of more as adjectives. In Latin, the process of being strong, the state of being strong was one thing. You weren't separate from your strength. You were your strength. So it's kind of an interesting just difference. But you don't have to worry about that. All we need to know is valera valitus means to be healthy, associated with strength, associated with health. The stem is val. And so it pops up probably more than you would think, right? So valid means strong or healthy, something that's valid is strong or healthy. And we use this a lot as an adjective, right? But then we have our noun, usually invalid. We don't use invalid as an adjective. We use it as a person who is not strong or who's not healthy for a given amount of time. When you validate something, you make it strong. Valedictorian, now this is someone who speaks. Actually, we can talk about this maybe. I'm not sure if we can. So valedictorian and a valedictory. This dict is related to the word dico, which I think we've learned. I'm sorry, we've done too many of these lectures. But dict means to speak. And what's going on here is a valedictorian is someone who's saying wale. And really, wale here means goodbye. So the valedictorian isn't someone necessarily who's speaking strongly, but the someone who's saying goodbye. And that is why they're the person who gives the speech at a graduation, right? They're saying goodbye to you. And then valedictory is just a version of this, and it means like the goodbye speech, essentially. Valedictory address is an address saying goodbye. But really what it's saying is wale. So there you go. And then ambivalence, if you're ambivalent, you are strong in both directions. Like that's kind of I always think of ambivalence as being torn in two directions, but really that valence is like you have two separate arguments in your head. Like, should I go to the gym or should I stay at home and watch TV? And those two arguments are both really strong. And so you're ambivalent about it. So that's kind of how that's working. Okay, so that's it. That's the end of lecture two. Come back for the lecture three, where we will just finish up this list of stems and talk a little bit more. And there will be a poem. Like everyone's like, I'm not coming back for that.